Hello everyone and welcome to the FinTech Times. My name is Tyler and today I'm here at MoneyLIVE, the summit in London. Right now I'm joined by Gerald. Gerald, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. Yes, it's great to speak to you today. Now just before we go on to our little chat, why don't you tell our viewers about who you are and where you've come from today?
Sure. So my name's Gerald, as you said. I'm Bunq's CCO. Bunq is a fully digital bank coming out of the Netherlands, but basically very European. And my main area of responsibility is our international expansion. I've been setting up international branches across Europe. I'm looking into the US, and I'm looking at strategic partnership projects for us.
Well, that sounds very exciting. Thank you for that. So I think really to kickstart our conversation, today at MoneyLIVE, we're looking a lot about the financial services sector and particularly how that has evolved with the sort of aftermath, hopefully, of the pandemic, along with a lot of other things like natural changes in society. I was wondering, in the last 2 years we've seen such a shift to digital banking specifically, and we've really seen this sort of new realm of banking really come into fruition. I was just wondering, in terms of being able to authenticate your users, and especially your new users, what has the journey been like for Bunq, and how are you making sure that you're keeping your users safe and secure?
It's interesting that you bring this up, because apparently it's a widely discussed topic, whereas for us, nothing has changed. I mean, we've been fully digital before the pandemic, we're fully digital now. We've done full online onboarding of our users ever since. But there's still a lot of change happening. And there's two things I think are relevant. A, technology is evolving. There is more and more service providers out there that come up with more sophisticated technology, AI-supported algorithms, different ways to make it simpler at the end of the day and more secure at the same time. At the same time, regulation across Europe isn't really keeping up with it. As I said, I've been setting up branches, virtual branches across Europe for us, and when you do that, you're facing different types of regulations in every country across the continent. So you have to deal with lots of different requirements, which sort of makes things overly complex.
Well, yes, I can imagine that would be quite a difficult thing to overcome, especially when you mentioned that you were looking to expand into different markets internationally. How have you seen the use of data become more prevalent in what you're doing?
We usually doing KYC and customer authentication through partners. And yes, of course, the way they deal with it is very much data-driven, but it's not something we do in-house.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's
it's data. If you want to elaborate on that, right? I think the data question on our side becomes more and more prevalent when it comes to AML rules along transaction monitoring. So once the customer's been onboarded and they've been active, they interact, they transact, we need to monitor all those transactions, obviously, and figuring out picking out the bad apples is, well, something everybody needs to do, and it's something that's more and more reliant on better data analysis at the end of the day. That's something we're very focused on, and that's something we build in-house.
So one of the major focuses in the industry at the moment is environmental and social governance, about trying to adhere to sort of the increased consumer demand for being environmentally friendly with finances. What is Bunq's view on this, and what are the steps that you've taken to adhere to that?
Well, that's another very interesting one, because again, the discussion so often revolves around companies that need to put ESG compliance on top of their model, whereas with Bunq, it's been part of our NDA from the very beginning. Right? We're built as a purpose-led company, and sustainability was at the core of what we've been doing from the very start. So since the early days, we allowed people to choose or to influence our investments decision on where we put the deposits. Yeah, since back in January, we allow every user to invest their own money into funds, and those are naturally then ESG funds. We've done our own climate report. We've committed ourselves to the Paris objectives of 2 degrees. We look at it in a very holistic way. Right? We look at it as a part of our own operations model, which is small because we're a small bank compared to others, but our footprint is something we manage. We look at it from an investments point of view. It's usually the biggest lever every bank has. Where do you put your money? Which activities, which ventures do you fund with the deposits people kind of leave you? And the third aspect is our user base. So we allow them to invest their money in a sustainable way. We educate them. We help them by planting trees on their behalf. Right? So for every 100 euros of spend they have, we plant a tree. We've done almost 6 million trees in 2 years.
Wow.
Right? So that's quite a bit for a small bank, I would say. So yeah, we look at, as I said, it's part of our DNA. It's very much incorporated in our operating model.
Well, that's really exciting to hear, especially when we see increasingly that consumers are really looking for banks and challenger banks that put their money where their mouth is. So I think it's really important, and that's sort of coming into being, and I think it's really good to see. I mean, you mentioned briefly about the sort of different challenges that Bunq encounters, and you mentioned that adhering to ESG was one of them. But in the last year, and especially through the lens of the pandemic, which is hopefully behind us now, what have been your other challenges?
I think one of the key learnings of last year, or the whole pandemic, was that our focus on our customer needs and being very, very close to what they want and what they need is more important than ever. Yeah? So we have a very close feedback loop with our user base. They influence on what we do, and that, I think, is one of the keys to our success. We've actually become profitable by the end of last year, which is, I think, a real achievement for a neobank these days. And building on that, we've also figured out, and you talked about challenges ahead, we're now in a stage where we need to scale up. We've proven we can be profitable. We now need to ramp up our user numbers. That we'll do organically as well as through M&A. So that's becoming an integral part of our strategy. We started last year by acquiring an Irish company, Capital Flow, who's in the SME lending space, which means they provide a very, very lucrative way of investing our deposits. So at the end, we're embracing parts of the original banking business model, borrowing and lending. And mastering that is definitely something that's at our focus.
And I mean, I don't want to talk maybe too specifically or in too fine a detail, but have you seen any real notable shifts in certain areas of consumer behavior?
With our user base, not so much, to be honest. As I said, we've been fully digital before the pandemic. We're fully digital now, right? So not so much has changed. What we see, I'd say, is an increased interest in the whole area of sustainability. So it becomes more of an issue or a topic. Other than that, we've always been centered on making our users' lives, financial lives, as easy as possible. And that's something people value, right? That's what we are built upon.
I think that's definitely true, and from the other industry experts that I've spoken to, that they've mentioned that this sort of turn to digital isn't the result of the pandemic. It's rather been exacerbated by it, and that a lot of, as you were saying, a lot of the models that exist now existed before the pandemic. It was just that they were accelerated by it.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the industry, the pandemic has certainly sped things up, accelerated things. Yeah, but it hasn't changed too much on a very fundamental level, I'd say. In this particular area, it has changed lots of other things, but not here.
Well, that is very interesting to see, and I think it'll be very interesting as well to see where it goes. I mean, speaking of the future and the future plans, what are your plans at Bunq for the future?
International expansion is one thing. So we're on a path where one of our mottos is bank like a local. So every country we kind of put a focus on. We want to compete with the local high street banks in a way, in terms of availability of our services. And that is a challenge because we still operate a single cloud-based platform. So balancing this simplicity and standardized approach on one hand with the customization and localization is certainly a challenge. But at the end, it's a driver for bringing in more users, right? And as I said earlier, scaling up, increasing the number of our users is at the core of our focus at the moment.
And have you got your eye on any particular market in a region?
If you look at it from a European point of view, we've put a focus on Germany, France, and then later this year Spain and Italy. We're also looking at Ireland because, as I said, we bought a company there and we see a significant opportunity in the market by two high street banks pulling out of the market. So there's going to be a lot of users on the move. So that's interesting as well for us. And we'll address all those markets with local IBANs, right? So we will provide local bank accounts to people in those markets, which I think is again a differentiator versus other neobanks.
Well, it sounds very much like you have a very interesting year ahead, and good luck with everything.
Thanks very much.
That you got on your plate.
Thanks for having me.
And I hope you enjoy the rest of the event.
Will do.
Thank you.
Cheers.